My name is Barbara Police, yes, Police. I was born in Greenwich Village. I'll be 69 in January, and I feel like sometimes I can redo everything that happened in my life, almost like a movie. My grandma always put everything on me. She felt I would be the one to carry on the legacy of the family, the Volpes and DeLises. In fact, the theater on Christopher Street was named DeLise for a short time because it's in honor of my family. And it's a long history. My grandma used to walk me down the block when I was a kid and say, "You see the blood on the ground? That's your family's blood." I was born, like Charles Dickens would say, premature, 3 pounds 11 ounces. They didn't think I was going to make it, but I did. Born and raised in the village. My mom, born and raised in the village. My grandmother, my great-grandmother, my great-great-grandmother.
So your family came to New York a long time ago?
1779. My
That's-
mom's family, not my dad's family. They came from Russia and Italy, my dad's family. But my mom's family, Italian and French. And they came from France and from Italy. But where the Holland Tunnel is was my great-grandmother's property. I think it was my great-grandmother who had the property there and sold it to the city. That's the DeLise part of the family. So they own that, but then she had 7 children. My grandma was one of them. And my great-grandfather died. They sold that area. They mostly were farmers. The Italian people came over with the art of bricklaying. In fact, where I was born and raised, 24 Charles Street, is a very old building. You look at it, it's all red brick. And they had a fire last year. I called the Historical Society and spoke to Sarah. And I said, you got to put it back the way it was. You can't. And it just happened to hit where I lived, on the 5th floor, the last apartment on this side. And I said, you got to get it back, those bricks. But there's no way we can get that kind of brick back. So what they're doing, I think there's still scaffolding over there, and they're redoing. I think they're taking some bricks from down, what the contractor told me, and bringing it up. So they're doing that with a few things, and I go down once in a while, and I drive them crazy. I drive them like crazy. And, I just, it's a childhood memory, There's a whole history there. From 14th Street, Charles Street,
Okay.
Waverly Place, Greenwich Street. That was all that was the meat district, all in that area down there. But way before that, that's where the ships were, and the longshoremen used to come in. All of 14th Street, where the veneer building is, was before that building. There was an odd-looking building, and that was for the longshoremen came in. Where we have the 13th Street Center was a butcher school before it became the center, the LGBT center. Before that, it was a prostitute house. Before that, it was a prostitute house. And before that, it was the longshoremen. And they used to have the red lights outside.
Oh, wow.
My grandmother told me. And then on the corner, when St. Vincent's came, such a pity that went out. It was a little building, a little tiny building with like a storefront window. And when I was a little kid, we used to get our shots there, or Northern Dispensary. Right in the middle of the village of Christopher Street, Waverly Place, coming off of there's the Northern Dispensary. Okay. It's a very old building. It's owned by the Archdiocese of New York. We tried to buy it before the center, because we thought that would be great. Christopher Street, what's better? But we didn't get it. I went to 27 Christopher Street. That was my school, St. Joseph's. Belonged to St. Joseph's Church, which was on 6th Avenue. Across the street, there's a building now as a little kid, I could look in. That's where Bayer aspirin was put in bottles. And that was a factory. And you would hear the boo in the daytime, because they would come out in the street to eat their lunch or whatever. And we used to look out the window when we were kids. I was in the 1st or 2nd grade, and we'd look out the window. And there they were working with Bayer aspirin bottles. In those days, were all glass. And then on the corner was the Candida Delicatessen. In my neighborhood, it was all artists, poor people, immigrants, blacks, whites, Chinese. There was Harry's Chinese Laundry. It was a very plain neighborhood, not what you know today. Rents, you could, if you didn't like the paint job, you moved to another apartment the next day. It was easy to get an apartment in the village because nobody wanted to live there from out of town because they thought we were all odd, which we were. I mean, I'm in a way a red diaper baby because my mom and dad were socialists. My papa and mom met in 1939, and it was his sister Terry. They were she had somebody else that night for my father as a date, but my mom went along with her friend Virginia. My dad took a look at her, and she took a look at him, and that was it. So from 1939, they dated. They were young, and then the war came along, and they were going to get married. And my father said, "What if you get pregnant, and I get killed?" So they waited, and Papa came out of the war in September 45 because he stayed in reconnaissance because he was a paratrooper. And the Screaming Eagles, the band of brothers, 101st Airborne Division, they were picked by Eisenhower and Hacker, General Hacker. There were 500 of them, of an elite bunch, almost like I guess you could say the Green Berets of their time, but they were paratroopers. And they were sent all over, and my father spoke from his mother Yiddish. He spoke several languages. So they used him in the camps. Okay. Imagine being 21 years old and seeing that. And he got quite a few medals. I think the Purple Heart, because he was wounded over England, over London during the Blitz. And he was the apple of my eye. I loved my mom, but my dad was, oh wow, because he taught me so much in my life. He remembered going in Dachau, which was a camp, and they were trying to use this big hose to get the lice off of the people that were left. And they ran because they thought they were going to be gassed. So they needed my father and a few others that spoke Hebrew or Yiddish or German or, Hungarian. There were so many different kinds. And he picked up this guy that was on the side, and he had a little striped uniform, dirty. And my father picked him up and was carrying him. And he says, "I guess you think I'm an old man." He says, "I'm 26. And that always preyed on my dad's mind. Mm-hmm. And they had to open those gas chambers. He said, "You don't want to know. You don't want to know." So my dad always said he couldn't, when the war story came on, he'd have to get up out of the room and walk to the other room. It just was too much for him. My mom said it took him a whole year to sleep in a bed. 4.5 years in a war, Belgium, France, Germany, England, Holland. He was all over the place. So wherever he was needed, he made 46 jumps.
What's his name?
James Vincent Police. But he was always known as Vinny. It was very hard for Mama, but they loved each other. That was a true love story. Whatever either one of them did, it didn't matter. My dad would smile or my mom would smile. And when I'd get in trouble with little things, I think I told you a story when I bought the bullfrog. I brought the bullfrog home and I said, "Ma, I got it." She says, "Out, that's it, out of the house. Bullfrog, flies, everything, out the door." And when my father came home, my dad had long hair. He had refused to cut his hair because during the war, that's all they had. They kept getting shaved and he didn't want that anymore. So when I was a little kid, my dad had longish hair. My mom was talking to him in front, and I was in my room, and I knew, uh-oh. And my father, he has a smirk on his face, and he bent down, and he says, "I heard you brought a frog home." He says, "Your mother doesn't like frogs." I said, "Well, Dad," I said, "he was a beautiful bullfrog." He says, "Don't do that again." He said, "I'm not going to punish you." He said, "But don't do it again." I got in more trouble. My father would just look at me and smile, and he'd say, "Don't tell your mothers I didn't punish you." He never did. We went to Met baseball games when Mets were polo grounds and everything, yeah. And my grandma on my mom's side, she was as rough as can be. She was a businesswoman where my grandfather loved to cook. And that's how we got into the restaurant business. My mother and my grandfather were the cooks. Oh, you taste their cooking. Oh, my God. Oh, God. I sometimes I would celery chicken, meatballs with raisins. Well, the real Italian food, the way my grandfather he would make ziti, not a baked ziti. Ziti with a special sauce where he would start like 6:30 in the morning. Oh my God, you could smell it all over Charles and Waverly. That sauce, and people would pass on a Sunday morning and know my grandfather and my mom were in my grandma's house. They had two stoves, two full-size stoves in the kitchen, and 2 ice boxes, refrigerators, and they cooked. And I told you there were a lot of stars that my grandfather rescued,
right.
When they were nothing. Ginger Rogers was very close to my grandfather, and Jimmy Durante, and a few others. I can't. Rocky Graciano and his parents used to come over. They'd
they
go
went-
into his restaurant. He had a restaurant on 3rd Street. He had one in Brooklyn, and he had one on Kenmare Street called Volpe's, Volpe. And people knew if you didn't have the money, you went into Louis.
Right.
Louis will feed you. It was well sold before I was born.
Oh.
The reason for that, my grandfather got sick, and my
Okay.
mom got sick. So it was hard. My mom was in the hospital quite often, and my grandfather got very sick. He died in 1960. He wasn't that old, no. In those days, but my mom gave me a lot of the recipes and everything, and I still cooked a lot. When my mom died in 85, I continued to keep up the tradition with my father until my dad passed in 2007. Well, her recipes, you follow, but I mean, the ingredients that she used, I can't afford it. Oh my God, because she would make a lasagna with 5 different cheeses, sirloin beef, God forbid it should be chuck. She made things, manigort. Then she would make the little pastries, pasticciota. Oh, God, that's delicious. Yeah, we made a big move across the street, 29 Charles Street. The 24 was a cold water flat, where from 6 to 7 o'clock at night, that's when you had hot water. You put your feet on the floor in the morning, oh, you'd know what cold was. Because it was a coal, C-O-A-L, coal. The truck used to come and dump it into the cellar, and Joe would put it in the stove, and, they didn't send it up all day or anything. So my mother would have the stove on, the one I told you, on the legs. Yeah, and they learned how to put plastic and stuff over the windows. That was a big thing in my day. Yeah, to keep you warm, because it was very cold in the apartments. And then in 29 Charles Street, when we got to 1D, we had the boiler right under us. And I said to my mother when we got in the house, I said, Ma, my feet are warm. So we'd have the heat on. People used to come and say, it's so hot in here, but we enjoyed it because we didn't have it in 24 Charles Street,
right.
We moved there in 1955 till my father died, 2007. You'd think my mom and dad would move out of the village? No. They both wanted to go feet first, out the door. That was it. Because they were different. They couldn't live in a neighborhood. Saturday night was card game. All the neighbors would come in, and they'd get the money out, and they'd start playing cards. This was, there'd be 2 tables going on in my grandmother's living room. During the week, it was Charlie Wagner time, and they're off. That's all you would hear in the radio. My grandmother would be sitting there back there with a cigarette and the bookie would be coming flying in, taking the chits and everything, and running out the door and put the bets in. Oh, please. My grandfather had the speakeasy down in the stairs. Al Capone used to come because he had a crush on my Aunt Tana, my grandma's sister.
Where do they get the liquor?
They
Yeah,
get
they're in the
it. They
business,
put it in
so-
coffee cups. The cops in the village, the 6th precinct, they were all, they let everything go. It was the
Sure.
neighborhood. They bet. If you wanted to bet during the day, I could say it now because they're all gone. Angelo's Deli, right up the corner. You go in there in the back, and Louise would take the money while she's making the sauce.
Okay.
Well, most of the movies you see are based on things that happen in real neighborhoods. And a lot from the village, an awful lot. You got to remember the authors, O. Henry, Steinbeck, Hemingway, they all lived in the village at one time. So,
That's right.
the influence of the village is all over with authors. Charles Dickens lived there, Mark Twain. I loved Star Trek when I was younger. They had a convention in the
Right.
old Hilton on 34th Street, and that's how long ago I went. And there was William Shatner there, Ray Bradbury, Major Barrett. I was outside, and I was talking to a lot of them, and I was talking to Michelle, and the one who played Sulu, who became in politics later on. I was standing outside with my book, and I see this little man coming towards me with a gray suit, a little cowboy tie, salt and pepper hair, out like this, and glasses down here. And I said, Isaac Asimov. I ran over to him. I'm going on about the foundation. He looked at me and he goes, a girl? A girl? Love science? And I said, yeah. He said, come. We sat at a table. I had the attention for 15 minutes, no more, of Isaac Asimov. That to me is one of the biggest things. He signed my book. He said, keep it up. And he said, he's the first one that said to me, he said, you're unique. And then later on in the 8th grade, we used to get those little books with the colored pages. You must remember them when you graduated school. The first time I heard about Unique, it was Isaac Ott, and then the second was Sister John Agnes. She put, Barbara, never change, stay unique. And I said to myself, wow, 2 people said that in my life, plus my parents. I guess so. I mean, if people tell. So I really got into a lot of things that other people would even not think of getting into. But science fiction opened a lot of doors for me. All the stories. Ray Bradbury with Fahrenheit 451, I think, is one of my all-time favorites because it has to do with books. To treasure books, treasure knowledge. That's another thing. I was in publishing. My office looked like one big library because I used to call different publishers. Can you send me a Sam, please? Can you send me this? Can you send me that? Told when I first started, my grandma knew a woman in May Daily Agency. And my cousin Linda and I got out of high school and we were looking for jobs. So my cousin Linda got a job in Ted Bates Advertising, and I got it in Rizzoli International Publications. And I went for the interview, and the vice president, Mr. Monticelli, interviewed me. And he got a big smile on his face. He says, a nice Italian girl. He says, you hired. I just was honest. I said, I'm out of school. I'm going to go to college eventually, but I can't right now. My parents can't afford it, so I'm coming to work. And we just talked about different things, and I told my family was from Naples and Rome. He liked that. And then Angelo Rizzoli came in. I was introduced to him. And Mr. Monticelli looked at him, and they both said, welcome. That was the start of my career. Then when they went out, I went to E.P. Dutton Publishing Company, Elsevier Dutton. They groomed me. I became head of distribution and customer service in E.P. Dutton, which women don't do. Not distribution because it's a tough job. But I did. I did it. I loved it. I had a charmed career. I would have still been working. I was never retired.
Sorry.
They were going to give me a lesser job, but, I was pompous. I got this attitude, but I wish I stayed. Having incredible bosses. One of the first black women in publishing, she went to Smith. Shirley Thorne. We loved each other from the moment we met. We went everywhere together. The big boss, Brenda Rappel, and our president, Joe Cannon, we were always together. I met a lot of people. I met a lot of authors. Stephen King came in when he was under the Bachman. We published them in Dutton. And he was standing near the desk in front, and I was coming through the office, and he looked at me, because I had thick glasses, if you ever saw it, and he went like this, and I went, and that was it. We were friends. The sciences were like his toy. He could just rattle off things, and I'd sit there and I'd say, oh my God, this is like, brilliant man. I met John Irving, Lana Turner. My mom her favorite actress was Lana Turner, and Lana Turner came in one day, beautiful, oh my God, that woman was stunning. And these steel blue eyes and everything. She came over to each one of us to thank us for working on her book. Joe Cannon was an incredible president. What he did do is a lot of the old times in publishing in our company, he would call in. If a new book came in or a new manuscript, we would all read it together. He made it his choice to do that. And Elsevier Dutton, Ivor Whitson, who came from Holland, Denmark, he used to come once a year. And he wore a big, weird-looking hat and everything with long black. He was a character. Publishing, you get a lot of characters, but that's where the brilliance is. So I was very, very happy in publishing. I learned a lot from them. But it gave me more knowledge to sit in with, on different meetings and to be with people that a million times more smart than me, and to sit with them, be able to listen to their conversation. It'll be 41 years, December 22nd. In a company, when in between Rizzoli and E.P. Dutton, I didn't get a job right away. I didn't get into E.P. Dutton right away. So my Aunt Gloria worked for a company called Standard & Poor's, which is it's a financial publishing. So my aunt said, you're waiting for the job, was ready for me, but not ready for me. So I went for 6 months in that job and met Pat. Destiny. It's meant to be. Then I went off to Dutton, but we still kept in contact. And then we had a 2-year courtship. I stayed with my mom and dad, and she stayed in her apartment. And after 2 years, we decided to move in.
And your parents, they all love
They
her.
they
Oh,
love Pat.
yeah.
My dad and she were buddies, and my mom was her cook. She loved my mom's cooking. She used to go there without me to eat.
Wow.
I'd
So you-
find at my mom's house. You know, time goes so fast. You look around, and all of a sudden you say
Right.
20 years, no, 30 years,
Yeah.
40, even here. I'm
Yeah.
here 36 years in December, and I say to myself, I'm here in Sage for 36 years. Okay, there were about 6 to 8 of us women, and we were thinking about when we get older, we have no place to go. We were all in our 20s and 30s, so we really grew into Sage. And there was a woman, Christine. I can't think of her last name. Amon. It's downstairs on the 6th floor. And we were talking one day, about 6 of us. She said, "Let's start an organization." So she started off. We started to get contributions and everything with her help, and Arlene, and Gregory, and Joe, and Jay, and me, and Pat, Susan Harris. There was quite a few of us, and we got together, and we've been all over the village. We were in Little West 12th Street. Then we were in a brownstone across the street from the center we have now on 13th Street. We were all over the place. And in fact, we were 127 West 27th, around the corner in a little office where we used to do our mailing. And I'll never forget Malcolm Smith, who's passed now. He said to me one night, Pat and I we would rent it 8 o'clock at night because you could get it for 4 hours for very little.
Mhm.
And we did our mailing. And I'll never forget one night, we all looked at each other and said, "My God, we got 150 members." And we thought this was like heaven, 150 members. We did our own licking, we did our own mailing,
Wow.
we did our own printing up of stuff and everything. Because years before that, I worked in a feminist newspaper, Majority Report, which my friend Joanne owned. And I worked on that for a long time. So I knew the format, of how to get things done.
Right.
And so that's the start. And then we got on 13th Street, and there was me, Philip, Bertie, Harriet, Mary, Pat and I, Kay, Peggy, a whole bunch of Morty, who's 96 now, and Catherine, a black woman, Gladys. There were a lot of us, and we went to 13th Street after all this traveling around to different places, wherever we could get, and we got an office down upstairs, one little office, and downstairs was where we had our social. Every day from like 1 o'clock to 4 or 5, people would come in, and we'd eat cake and sit around and talk and everything. And we had membership. It was like $5 or $10 in those days. And we started to get contributions. That's what got us going. Then we formed a corporation. Then it became a nonprofit. There was a lot of paperwork that I have no idea, but they did it, Philip and a few others, at that time when we took more people in that knew more than we did. Then we formed a board of directors. Edie Windsor, who they just donated, made the center named after, Edie Windsor now. It's Edie Windsor Sage. She was on the board of directors for a long time. She was the first woman to make programs for IBM. So she was a very smart woman, a very rich woman. When she passed just about 3 months ago, they had a big memorial for her and everything. Edie was a little shorter than I was. And I'll never forget it because she called me up when I went blind, and she said to me, she was rough. She said, "You're not going to quit." I said, "Edie," she said, "we're going to go out. We're going to go to dinner. I don't want to hear this nonsense. We're going to have dinner." So she did a lot of impact on me too. My political days, I worked for Bella Abzug. I worked for her I worked on the mayoral campaign, the Senate campaign, Congress, you name it, I worked. And then I started a career, and then I got on the city committee and the city council, Carol Bellamy. So my path was 9 different directions. I liked it because I loved learning, and I like to, give information so people could carry on this stuff. It's more needed now than ever.